70 times 7. This is what Peter's saying. I only want to do it 7 times. I don't want to do it any more than 7 times. And this is the problem, isn't it? We do come to the end of our tether, don't we? What do you think? I think this is one of our problems. Is that we get to the stage we think, well, surely I've done enough. Surely you don't expect me to do any more, you know? I've forgiven this person so many times. I think of my son, who's very similar to me. And he's got a good heart as my son, but he's also got my button to press. You know? You can press that button any time, any day, any time of the day or not. And he winds me up something crying, because he's just so like me. Just so much like I was when I was his age. And I have to continually tell myself that. And at the same time, whenever I'm in a situation where he's done something that I don't like again, I have to continually tell myself, I must forgive him. We must move on. And there, but for the grace of God, go I. I have got God's wisdom now. I have been born again. My son is still going through the motions. He has a healthy respect for God. He has a healthy respect for heaven and hell. He doesn't particularly like church, but he's making lots of mistakes. And it's because he is not really yet enlightened. He doesn't have that light, really. Not enough of it. He has some of it, but he doesn't have enough light. And at this moment in his life, he's not prepared to try and find that light, try and walk by that light. And so there needs to be compassion. There needs to be an element where he's growing up. He's growing into the person that God would have him be. And when I look at the people in the scriptures, I don't know anyone apart from Daniel. There was nobody through the scriptures that didn't make any mistakes. You look at it. So if we all make mistakes, and these people have all been used by God, how much more should we forgive those people around us, knowing that, being aware of that, recognizing that each one of us have made mistakes, and each one of us need to be forgiven. And this man here that the Lord is talking about, he tells a story about a man who came to a king and wanted to settle his account, but he couldn't. And the king wanted his money from this servant. And when the king had begun to settle the accounts, this man was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. Well, I don't know if you know how much money that is, but let me tell you, that is a lot of money. The talent of silver was a lot of money. I seem to remember that a talent was something like a man's wages for a year. And this man owed him 10,000 talents. That's a lot. But as he was not able to pay, his master commanded that he be sold, with his wife and children and all that he had, and that payment be made. I mean, what an incredible position to be in. Imagine that you can't pay your debts. You've got debts that are quite vast. We don't know why he ended up owing that money. We don't know why he got into debt. And we talked a little bit about debt last week. And the fact that there are debts in our life is not the worst thing that could ever happen to us. But when we have got into debt, just imagine this person's feeling about what's going on in his life. Somebody I know became an alcoholic, and it wasn't until that person felt that he was going to be made homeless that suddenly he kind of woke up and said, I need to change. I need to do something. Now this man here, we don't know if he got into debt through that kind of thing, but certainly he was in a lot of debt. And suddenly he's going to be sold into slavery. This is not a good situation. And not only he is going to be sold, but he's probably never going to see his wife and children again, because they're going to be sold as well. And all that he's got is going to be taken away from him, everything. And he will become a simple slave. With no prospects, no future. His life, apart from the fact that he's still breathing, his life is, for all intents and purposes, is over as a slave. He is never ever going to be his own man. He's always going to be the property of someone else, to do with what they will. To be sold again, to be flogged to death, to be worked to death, to do whatever his master's bidding. And this man obviously decides that if this is something that, you know, this is really bad. So what does he do? The servant therefore fell down before this king and said, "Master, have patience with me, and I will pay you all." And then the master of that servant was moved with compassion. So the king was moved with compassion and released him and forgave him the debt. Very similar to what Joseph did with his brothers. He forgave him. He didn't hold him to ransom over it. He had every right to. In the same way that Joseph had every right to do that. In the worldly system, in the world that we live in, this would be quite normal and quite natural. And this is the problem, isn't it, friends? It's because we think in the way the world thinks generally, and we need to get Egypt out of ourselves, and we need to get God into ourselves, because this is how Egypt thinks. This is how the world thinks. But this king was a good king. This master was a good master. He had compassion. And he released him. He forgave him the debt. So he wiped it clean. And then what did this servant do? Well, it says, this servant went out and found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii, which is not a lot of money, by comparison to 10,000 talents that he owed. I don't know if anyone's been to Greece, but denarii, you know, probably a couple of those to a pound. May have changed since I've been there, but probably about £50. Imagine that. 10,000 talents, £50. And what did he do? And he laid hands on him and took him by the throat, saying, "Pay me what you owe me." And so his fellow servant fell down at his feet and begged him, saying, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you all." And the man wouldn't. But he went and threw him into prison till he should pay the debt. So when his fellow servants saw what he'd done, they were very grieved, and they then came and told the master. Now, isn't this a picture of what we're like too in our lives? Certainly before we become Christians and we know different, this is something that goes on all the time. You know, I remember when I was in my youth, and when I first got into business, if anybody owed me money, I was really keen to get every last penny. But of course, when I ended up getting into some debt in business, which, you know, most businesses kind of goes up and down, you know, it's never the same usually. But you know, when I was in business and I got into debt, I was very, very much falling on the mercy of those people that I owed the money to. And yet at the same time, because I lived in the world system, And I've